Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. We're back in the pub, still at a safe social distance, but it is Christopher Hamill, it is Patrick Van Straaien and myself here to answer your burning questions. Let's jump straight into it then. Luke Pavloi7 says, which player will surprise Europe the most this season? Now, I want to pivot that because it's quite a boring question. No offence, Luca. I've tried my best to get it in there at least. But I want to talk about some of the youngsters that have broken through in the Premier League, because last season was sort of Foden, was Greenwood, was Bukayo Saka to a level. Who do we expect to break through this season? Who's going to surprise us the most in the youth? Tariq Lamptey, maybe, Hamster?
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy that when I put this in the WhatsApp group last night as a suggestion for a feature question, you suggested the three aforementioned names, right? And they're kind of almost well established now. Like Greenwood put up almost 1,500 minutes. Foden started the season for Manchester City after finishing it very strongly. Saka, I mean, we still don't quite know his best position and where he fits into Arteta's system, right? But after all those assists, that lengthy run in the Europa League, like he's not a household name, but they're established right now. We're going to check in on their progress in a little bit. But yeah, I did want to talk about Lamptey because, as you guys may have noticed at home, I've been a bit Brighton obsessed at the start of this season.
Brighton. What was that thing you said last night?
What did I say last night?
It was something about him versus Lampard, I think.
Oh, was it a tweet this morning?
Yeah, this morning maybe.
That bus journey in here was long for you, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
It was, if he's getting 4 dribbles per 90 out of Solly March, then that is definitive proof that he's better than Lampard. I was just doing it to be antagonistic, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, let's crack on with Lamptey then, because he finished last season pretty strong. Graham Potter took a little while to break him into the side. It was post-lockdown that he really came to prominence. But he showed him a vote of confidence, shipped Montoya out on loan, I believe. That Scalato left the club. He looked like he should be working at Game Station anyway,
he was terrible.
Or CEX. But anyway, moving on from that, Lamptey's already started 4 games this campaign. And I mean, he only started 7 in the whole of 1920, so he's really hitting his stride now, isn't he? And the only game he hasn't started this campaign was the 4-2 loss to Everton, and I think he chucked him on, which was a sure sign of how important he's becoming to this side and sort of reversing their fortunes when they're chasing games. Impressed with him defensively, pretty sound, 3.8 tackles and interceptions, a 65% success rate with his tackles, so when he nips in for the ball, he normally gets it, doesn't he? No player under the age of 21 is completing more interceptions than his 2.3 in the league as well. That's level with Declan Rice, who you'd expect that from, right, playing in CDM. But Declan Rice also still 21. Which is quite surprising. Yeah. So
battered as well by some people in the WhatsApp chat. I won't say who in the Football Day WhatsApp chat, but I think Declan Rice is clearly underrated.
Maybe not deserving of that grief or heat, and I could see Declan Rice's numbers spiking if he moved club. But anyways, we're talking about Lamptey, aren't we? So going forward as well, I think that's where he's caught people's eye. 1.3 dribbles, that's really solid progression. You'd expect that to jump as he sort of embeds himself into the side, becomes a little bit more comfortable. Not quite his searing pace and like this ability to beat his man isn't quite translating into elite chance creation yet. So only 0.8 key passes per 90, which is...
Penalties galore though. He's a penalty winner.
That is very true, very good point. Which is not great, it's not bad, but there's certainly room for improvement, and that's what's exciting about Lamptey. I think there's a lot more to come from him. Pass accuracy 76% too, which is the worst out of Brighton's starting 11, so it can be a little bit wasteful with it sometimes still, or his decision making still needs fine tuning, but you expect that, don't you, from a 20-year-old who's not got that many minutes under his belt. I just think understandable, him leaving Chelsea. Reece James was obviously in front of him. Dan Ashworth, who's got a good eye for talent, spotted him in the England under 16, 17, 21 stages and nipped in there and bought him for 1.3 million, rising to 3 mil, which is going to be a ridiculous bargain when they sell him back to a top 6 club for 30 million. I just think he's been this season's young, eye-catching player for me, but I am starting to become infatuated with Potter, with Brighton, and how quickly they've gone from being like this doggedly, defensively astute side under Chris Hughton to one of the most entertaining teams to watch, to the point where I got to the fixtures, looking at the fixtures this weekend, and it was like Crystal Palace Brighton. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna give that a go, or at least record it. But Celtic Rangers on, so probably not. What are you saying though? Because I know you've been impressed with Reece James, Pato, and he's effectively the guy that they opted to keep over Lamptey. Correct decision for both? This feels like a situation where it's good for every party.
Yeah, I think probably, because Reece James to me is maybe at the highest level of all the under-21s in the Premier League at the moment. Like, I mean, obviously Foden's very good, Saka's very good, like Greenwood's very good, but like Reece James is already pretty much a top class right back. He's incredibly creative. He's decent defensively. He's obviously got a great set piece delivery as well. Like, so I mean, he's actually in the mould of Trent Alexander-Arnold, right? He's that guy who's looking for passes in the final third, but perhaps need to cover for him a little bit more defensively. But I think he's going to mature into an excellent player. I mean, he doesn't really count as a breakthrough though, right? Because he broke through last year. So I'm trying to think about who's likely to get some minutes this season. You know, who's playing and is also who's playing in a position of need for a bigger side. And I think that probably somebody like Smith-Rowe for Arsenal could well end up a starter by the end of the season. Like, he's extremely highly thought of in the Arsenal Academy. And the Arsenal Academy right now is in a pretty strong position. Like, some really good players coming through. Because even guys like Nelson and Willock, who I don't particularly rate, I think Arsenal will sell them to top flight clubs, either in the UK or abroad, for decent fees, and that is a success for an academy.
On that, what did you think about keeping Maitland-Niles in the face of that £20 million bid from Wolves? Do you think they should have sold, stuck or twist effectively?
No, I definitely would have kept him. Like, Maitland-Niles is just so versatile. What I wouldn't have done originally is brought in Cedric, but I think they brought in Cedric thinking Maitland-Niles was going to go. Then he played his way back into Arteta's good books, and now they're kind of stuck with
Didn't register
a bit
Cedric,
of a surplus of fullbacks.
Definitely
Pardon?
didn't register Cedric for the Europa League.
No, Cedric is registered.
Oh, I'm sure.
There was rumours he wasn't going to be.
He
Him and
in the
Ozil,
squad.
yeah.
We didn't register. No, we didn't register Socrates or Ozil or Saliba for the Europa.
Oh, right, okay. Because he was
which is
one
funny
of the
because
names.
then Saliba can't play in the Europa, and it looks like we're going to keep him until January. So
He was one of the names, though, Cedric Suarez, wasn't he? That
I'm
was
not
in
surprised.
contention.
I'm not surprised, but he can play on both sides, and I think he is still a good fullback. So I don't have an issue with him being there. But maybe that'll mean like Maitland-Niles could get a shot in midfield. Oh no, wait, we bought Thomas Partey for 45 now. So. But what I do look at this Arsenal side is Partey, I think, is a great signing. I mean, I have issues with it, like in terms of age and money, but I think he's an excellent player. What he doesn't do is solve the creativity issue in this Arsenal side. Arsenal are, I think, currently taking about 7.5 shots a game. Like I looked at so far this season. So far this season of Europe's top 5 leagues, there are 98 teams, and I think Arsenal are 92nd for shots taken a game.
Powerfully dull, isn't it?
But the shots at least are high quality. So, you know, like it's Eddie Nketiah has never seen a keeper in his life. He's only ever passed the ball into an empty net. So, you know, we are still okay at creating those bigger chances. But Ozil has clearly been frozen out. Who else in that team can create? Smith-Rowe is the only attacking midfielder we actually have. And as a result, it might be that if it carries on like this, I do think Arteta's going to notice we're taking no shots. I'm pretty certain he's noticed already because he's talking about it all the time. So I think that therefore he might have to rejig the system, and maybe with Partey there, he has more confidence, can go to a 4-2-3-1 and considers playing Smith-Rowe in that position. So it's more about Arsenal being in great need than me thinking Smith-Rowe is like the most talented young player in the league. But he was very good on loan in a half season last year at Huddersfield. 2 shots a game, 2 dribbles a game, 2 key passes a game in the Championship. That tends to translate quite well, as we've seen with Buendia, Maddison.
I feel like we've seen this before with Dan Crowley. Or was it Crawley?
Dan Crowley? Yeah, we just sold him though. Like, he was just shit.
Like, he went to the Eredivisie, didn't he?
He went to the Netherlands, yeah, and then we sold him. But I mean, like, but Smith-Rowe is much more in that modern breed of fullback, where number 10, where he can also dribble, he will defend, and he's more mobile. Whereas Ozil is very much the older style, where it's a guy who just stands in front of the penalty box and just like picks people out.
Do you think there's an argument? Like, I was speaking to George about Bukayo Saka, who we're not mentioning so much today because obviously we talked about him being a breakthrough star last season, playing as that 10-8 attacking midfield role. Because I've heard it brought up on the England setup as to whether he could play in there as well. I've heard it brought up for Arsenal because potentially not really a wing back, maybe not really a winger. Where's his best role? Could he not play just a bit more centrally? And he obviously is good going forward and fairly good defensively.
I mean, he has done a little bit so far this season. Like, quite often when you see him play on the wing, he does kind of come inside. Like the thing is, we talk about formations a lot, but formations are kind of bull, right? Like we know that you can play 3-4-3 in a million different ways. You can play 4-2-3-1 in a million different ways, and he often has played in a sort of hybrid winger/8 role.
Yeah.
If Smith-Rowe isn't good, like, I mean, Arteta will have a better idea of that having seen him on the training ground. And if Smith-Rowe isn't good, I would definitely think Saka's worth a shot there. Because if you had a Ceballos, Partey, Saka midfield, I think you've definitely got enough defensive solidity. And Saka does seem to have an eye for those passes. You know, you saw in the West Ham game, for instance, like it was his pass before the assist, which led to those goals, like playing Aubameyang in behind to clip it over for Lacazette, playing Ceballos in behind to create the chance for Nketiah.
I liked his work from out wide last season.
Yeah.
Cutting the ball across goal or delivering like a sumptuous ball, across the 6-yard box. Like it felt like, I don't know much about him, this is just a general feeling, but it felt like he was comfortable delivering from a wide position. Yeah, he didn't strike me as like a Foden who's comfortable at receiving it sort of like on the back foot on the half turn. Like in that sense, he doesn't strike me as a 10, but that might be my kind of inexperience, my lack of understanding of him as a player.
No, I kind of agree. Like I prefer him in a sort of 4-3-3 as that like left-sided, more attacking midfielder than I would as a straight up 10.
Currently is.
But at the same time, he's very young, and it's possible he developed that. Either way, Arsenal are probably going to have to put their faith in one of their teenagers. But I would rather, I think, play Saka on the wing right now because I think the left wing is so weak.
Same, that's where I'd like to see him
get Aubameyang central.
Well, get anyone central. Like, just play wingers on the wing, play strikers as strikers.
I know.
Like, when you have strikers playing on the wing, you were talking about this with England's performance last night. Don't put Calvert-Lewin out on the wing when that's not where he should be. Like,
That's hilarious.
Whether Aubameyang's exactly the right profile for Arteta as a striker, he's not a winger. He's not particularly creative, and he's certainly not going to dribble past the fullback and ping it in on his left foot. And that's not his fault. He's just not a winger. Yeah. So play Saka there if you have to. Play somebody there when it's their preferred position, because otherwise, to me, what defines football matches is getting your best players on the pitch in the right position most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that impressed me with Reece James. Just to come back to Reece James a little bit, last night in his first England start, was he was actually playing almost out of position as a wing-back. In there. I actually think he's better as a right back in the same way we saw Trent try and play as a wing back against Belgium, and it.
So what is it about Trent's or Reece James's game that you think it really disrupts their game, playing a little bit further up the pitch, or at least their starting position being a little bit further?
Definitely with Trent in particular. Trent is better when he doesn't have to wait out there and can come a little bit later and whip balls in from deeper. When Trent is the furthest man up on the right-hand side at times, it's almost like he's waiting for the ball.
Right. So is he kind of better off sitting off his man,
I think he's way better as a natural right-back, so he can kind of slowly move up into that space, and then the defenders don't know where to go out to him.
He's also less athletic, right? He's less athletic than Reece James. Reece James is incredibly fast and really strong, whereas Trent is much more like Beckham-y.
Well, that as well, and I thought Reece James did a great job last night as the wing-back against Denmark. He's probably our best player on the night, and had a really, really solid game. Yes, he got sent off after the whistle, but who really cares? That ref was an absolute shambles from start to finish. He was very, very good going forward. He has an unbelievable delivery. It's almost Trent-like going forward. It's not
he probably doesn't get the credit because Trent's is so good, right? No one's really talking about
There was 4 or 5 deliveries into the box
technique
that Harry Kane absolutely should have got on the end of. And for like a 20-year-old, he's definitely one of the best fullbacks in the league. And I had a bet with Jalab, who sat behind the camera pre the start of the season when Chelsea had the influx of players. And I said to him, this is classic Chelsea, the academy boys, what's happened to the academy boys? I'll bet you 10 quid or whatever it was that an academy player doesn't start more than 30 games in the league this season for Chelsea. Just because I was thinking, as Peace captain, club captain, he's probably going to start a right back. Mason Mount eventually, whether it's at the start or not, I think he's going to get usurped by Kai Havertz in that 10 role. So I just don't see it happening. But Reece James, that bet's gone. 100% Reece James is the starter for Chelsea this season. Unbelievable talent.
Unless he gets injured, and then it's quite a close bet.
Yeah, you never know. I mean,
not that we're wishing injury upon Reece James.
Also, it seems like, which is something we talked about before the season, that Lampard might like to play Werner off the left and play Tammy through the middle, which is kind of similar to how Werner played at RB Leipzig. So you might see Tammy do it as well.
Yeah, I would be surprised Tammy got over 30 starts.
Yeah,
I think he will probably be in the rotation side.
Even if he
24,
didn't,
25.
Even if he got 25 starts, that would be a good career progression.
Very solid. And I was having a look at some of Reece James's Premier League numbers this season. 4.5 tackles and interceptions, 2.7 key passes from right back.
Yeah.
Which is very solid. And obviously that helps when you take set pieces and deliver very good crosses into the box.
Corners as well, yeah. I think what you just kind of pointed out there is maybe a little bit of an underrated facet of his game. Like Trent, all of his good work is done in that sort of like space that KDB has kind of hallmarked over the last 2 years.
The deeper area, the slightly deeper
which is
zone.
like a square pretty much from the penalty, from the area. Whereas Reece James can go outside as well. He can beast people down the line, can't he? Like reminiscent of Antonio Valencia when he first converted to a right
But this
back.
is what's so frustrating when everybody goes, oh, play Trent centre mid for England. I'm just like, just play him where he needs to be played. He's best right back, arguably in the world, and we're trying to play him centre mid, right wing back.
Especially if Henderson's our central midfielder, right? He's going to cover from at right back.
Just play him in his role. Another player that I wanted to bring up, this is a bit of more of a left field shout, but I think Pedro Neto is a great shout for this area.
Yeah.
Still only 20 years old, and I think because Wolves have the household names, I suppose you would call them now, of the Raul Jimenez and Adama Traore, Diogo Jota, who's just left for Liverpool, obviously, is those sort of attacking forces. Everybody's like forgetting about players like Pedro Neto, who for 20 years old had an okay season last year. You know, only 9 starts, but I think 6 goal involvements in those 9 starts, and has started this season brilliantly. Obviously, Diogo Jota's moved on. Looks like he's going to more than fill those boots. He's started in every single league game so far this season, putting up over 2 key passes, over 2 shots, over 2 dribbles. Very, very impressive in what is a proper system team. You know, you have to be super disciplined to play for Wolves. You can't just be a luxury player.
I think that's one of the hardest positions to play for Wolves that Diogo Jota was doing. It's literally get the ball from deep and find Raul Jimenez and like play off Jimenez. It's really difficult.
And the thing is like Podence is looking hot in there as well in that role of like coming in off the left a little bit, and then Pedro Neto comes in off the right, and they mix in with Raul Jimenez. It's just like really, really impressive. And you know, they've paid big money for youngsters this summer. Fabio Silva has come in, hasn't he?
35 million.
And he only started 1 game, did he?
Porto,
last
11
season?
substitute appearances, I think,
Which
in the
is
league.
obviously a George Mendes back deal. I would imagine that George Mendes is probably
He
his
was
agent.
very, very highly thought of, and people have been comparing it to the kid that was bought by Atletico for 120, João Felix. People have been comparing it to the João Felix move and saying it's kind of a bargain in comparison when you consider Atletico paid 120 million euros.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a risk, but maybe we've been saying, haven't we, like for the last 3 or 4 weeks, if you're a club like Wolves, you've got money, take those risks at 30 million euros. So I can see why they've done it, but
yeah, but I think Pedro Neto is probably the guy to watch out for in terms of like 20-year-olds this season. If he gets sort of 10 to 15 goal involvements as a 20-year-old in this Wolves side, which is dominated by Raul Jimenez goal involvements. Obviously, like João Moutinho, I think takes penalties, doesn't he? And obviously, you've got Ruben Neves on every set piece. Then I think he's worth keeping an eye on. Should we touch on some of those other players then that kind of broke out last summer? I want to bring up Dwight McNeil as well as an under-21 player. Obviously played
every game.
Started as well every single Premier League game last season. Didn't get in the England under-21s setup, which obviously left Sean Dyche rather angry in his pre-season chats. And I think he's a candidate for one of the most exciting under-21s. Obviously not the level of sort of a Hudson-Odoi or a Greenwood, but a very consistent performer. And I think if Burnley were to get relegated this season, which might well happen, I think he will probably be picked up by a top 10 club.
Given the whole situation with the prospective new owners, right, and the fact that they only signed Dale Stevens.
Yeah, 900k.
Who was 900k, so they spent under $1 million this summer. And when you consider what he's been delivering, Sean Dyche has been delivering for the last few seasons, you expect a drop off, and I think he expects a drop off as well. Post-match, all of his post-match interviews have been quite negative in that sense, haven't they? And you can see why you sort of sympathise with him. But statistically, he stands out like a sore thumb in that side, doesn't he? He's the only one who's kind of completing over a dribble, over a key pass. He is a very good player.
Yeah, like his goals and assist numbers don't necessarily show like this incredible young talent, I think. But what you've got to remember is in this Burnley team, it is kind of...
He's still playing in a pragmatic system.
You are going to be playing as like an actual left mid here. It's almost like a left back.
Yeah, it's whip the ball into Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes as soon as you get it, Dwight.
Exactly. And Ashley Barnes obviously had a long-term injury, so he's been whipping it into more like Jay Rodriguez and Chris Wood, which I actually think Ashley Barnes is a very solid player. But when Dwight McNeil, if they get relegated, they might not. They might stay in the Prem. I do think for a 20, 21-year-old, he could probably get a move to a Southampton, maybe, that sort of level club that's sort of...
I think the concern is...
10 to 12.
I think the concern is sometimes like these players are people talk about them as going to top 6 clubs. I don't really see that happening for Dwight McNeil.
He was being linked to the likes of Juventus, I agree. I don't think that's quite his
That's one of the
level,
all-time great transfer review titles.
But
Dwight
you know,
McNeil to Juventus.
he could go to a sort of, maybe even a Brighton and Potter get something out of him, that sort of player, where he's very sort of system dependent and just going to work hard.
Any team from the bottom half down that plays kind of a 4-4-2 or with a traditional winger, like, he is worth a look in, isn't he?
I think he could play as a wing back as well, like feasibly. If you've got really solid centre backs, I think he could do that. I mean, we should probably also talk about Illan Meslier.
Yeah,
like, who,
the Leeds keeper.
You know, like, keepers are hard to find, and keepers who can play with their feet at 20 and are also decent shot stoppers are pretty special. You know, and Leeds play a high line. Like last season, I wrote a scout report over the summer on the prospects I felt for the promoted sides, and I said, like, I'm quite bullish on Leeds. Like, I think we all think that they'll stay up and do pretty well. Yeah. But I also said they play such a high line. They're so dependent on possession. I think they're going to catch some beatings, like, just because teams are going to get in behind them in the Premier League. When you've got a keeper who is able to compensate for a really aggressive defensive line, that's pretty exciting. So I think Meslier, you know, he's very experienced for his age. He's got a pretty rounded skill set. Like,
massive head as well. Respect.
Yeah. Well, that's your genre, isn't it?
He looks like a villain from like a Pixar film.
Yeah. I mean, should we talk about Callum Hudson-Odoi as well? Because I think Callum Hudson-Odoi is going to have...
kind of old news, though.
He is, but he's newsworthy because of the £80 million bid that was rejected by Chelsea from Bayern.
They should have taken that.
You would have taken that straight away? It was
Yes.
it was a loan to start with, remember? A loan with
Yeah,
an
but
option
80
to
mil
buy.
guaranteed is... If you value Callum Hudson-Odoi at more than 80 million, why did you go out and spend like 200 million on your front line this summer? If you think Callum Hudson-Odoi is that good...
But they didn't arguably. My argument to that would probably be none of those players are natural right wingers.
Pulisic has played there and Ziyech has played there.
But he's probably going to play in like sort of rotation with Hudson-Odoi.
80 mil is so much money. Like, when you look at players who've cost over like 75 mil in football history, there aren't that many. And of those, a lot of them didn't end up being worth the money. Like, Coutinho wasn't worth the money, Dembele wasn't worth the money, Griezmann wasn't worth the money. Like, Maguire was overpriced. Like,
but Bayern have
Kepa was terrible. Pepe is not good. Like, there are loads of these guys where you're just like, 80 million is still an unbelievable amount of money.
For Bayern to bid that as well is insane. Like, they don't bid that sort of money for anyone, do they?
Well, Lucas Hernandez, and that went.
But that was a release clause, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This isn't me saying, like, I don't think he's that good and you should take that money. It's just that I think they don't need him in that attack. Take the 80 mil and deal with some other squad holes. Take the 80 mil and try and get a deal in place now for the person who's going to come in as your left-sided centre-back next year.
So now that Ziyech is fit again, obviously played for Morocco midweek and he's probably going to be fit for the weekend's games, Hudson-Odoi has started the last couple of matches. Do you drop Hudson-Odoi for Ziyech's fitness? Now he's back in this Chelsea team.
I probably wouldn't play either. Probably wouldn't start either.
What do you mean you wouldn't start over? They've got to start somebody out there.
No, my Chelsea attack, my first
You're
choice
playing
Chelsea...
Pulisic on the right,
My
Werner
first-
on the left and Tariq through the middle, aren't you?
Is this a
Like a
4-3-3?
clown.
Or is Lampard...
I think that's probably my first choice.
I
Is
knew that you'd
Lampard-
say that.
It depends who you're playing. It depends who you're playing.
Yeah, is he persevering with the 3-4-3? What's going on at Chelsea at the moment? Like, when I watch him, I still feel like he doesn't know his best system or best 11.
It's almost like he's not a very good man.
Well, surely when he actually...
What do you mean, come on? What's the evidence that he's a very good manager? He's fine.
He got top forward Chelsea last season on a transfer ban.
He's definitely competent.
With a
Definitely
transfer
competent at the
ban,
moment,
transfer ban which saw them bring in Pulisic and Kovacic is not
But
that much
also
of a
saw
transfer
them lose
ban.
their best player potentially in like the last decade.
Yeah, but also we looked at it and we were like, oh, he's done an amazing job because look how well he's done with these academy players. But I think we're all acknowledging, like with Reece James, for example, that these academy players are actually really good. Like, this is like, if you could go back in time and somebody like came in to manage Man United when the class of 92 came through, then people at the time would have been like, God, if they do well with these kids, like, it'll be really overperforming. But we can look back at it now and say, no, those were great players. So he wasn't overperforming, he just had great players. And I think, yes, he lost Hazard last year, but Chelsea's squad was really, really good and was underrated at the beginning of last year. And like really deep, really solid. And their youngsters, like Tammy Abraham was good, Mount was okay. Like James was excellent. Even Tomori like gave them a lot of value. They got some value out of Billy Gilmore. I think their young players are great.
My only gripe with Lampard, and people are sort of starting to get on at me in the comments because they feel like I've got some sort of
he's a Tory.
some sort of issue with him. I think he's like a perfectly competent manager, but is he deserving of like the Chelsea job at the moment? He's a club legend. Like he brought a lot of good.
Surely he is though, because he's done nothing to not deserve it.
No, but I'm not. I'm saying it's up for debate, right? Which is what makes it interesting to discuss Lampard in the Chelsea. Yeah. I want him to be good. Like, he's a very likable guy. You want him to be good. Good young English managers can only bode well for the national team and bringing on young English players, but. It's like, you can't tell me that if Julian Nagelsmann didn't have this squad at his disposal, or like maybe 3, 4, 5 other candidates in Europe, that we wouldn't be seeing better results from them. And Chelsea can sort of have their pick of the bunch. They can be best in class with the money and the support that they have behind them. That's my only issue with Frank Lampard. He's doing a good job, but could someone else be doing a much better job?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
There's a difference, isn't there? There's a difference, isn't there, between saying like this person isn't like maybe isn't good enough or maybe isn't the best you could get, and saying this person deserves the sack. Like I don't think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer deserves the sack at Man United, but if I were in charge of Man United, I'd be like, we've got to get in Pochettino as a.
And to be fair to Lampard, the numbers didn't drop. They were very similar to Sarri's numbers. The output, the shots they conceded per 90, the shots they produced, like the attack was very proficient. It was very unlucky actually in terms of big chances being converted and Kepa letting in a load of goals that shouldn't have been let in. So under the hood, still very solid. But up at like 66 points, like might have finished 6th in another season.
Yeah, but equally, for me, I just think that I actually think Lampard's done a really good job with that Chelsea team.
Solid, I think solid. I don't think poor, but solid. I think solid.
And I would have to say I wouldn't play Tammy in their best team.
Really?
Yeah, I just don't think.
He was so good last year, though.
Yeah, but I think you saw towards the back end Frank starting to favour Giroud over him.
Yeah, but I think that's an example of Lampard like not being good at his job. Like I think that's an example of him like doing bad talent evaluation.
And when I think you've got Timo, who in my opinion does do his best work through the middle, I think you play Pulisic, Timo, Ziyech, Havertz in the hole would be my. And then
I've got no issue with that. I think it depends who you're playing. Like it's just with certain people. Like if I wanted to break down a sitting defence, I play Ziyech. But if I know I'm going to play a bit more on the counter, I want Pulisic, Tammy, and Werner just running through the.
All right. Any other of these names then?
Yeah.
Phil Foden.
I wanted to bring it. I think we're definitely worth reviewing Phil Foden's progress. But before that, I did want to bring Curtis Jones to the table because I think he's one of the most exciting kind of central midfield options that English football has produced in the last maybe 5 or so years. Like we've produced an awful lot of defensively minded players or very like athletic players who are capable of like playing in systems, press heavy systems or whatever. But Curtis Jones, with the ball at his feet, extremely exciting talent. And he only got like 130 minutes last season in the Premier League, and it feels like he got more because he was given chances at big stages of cup competitions, wasn't he, last season? And he performed really well against a strong Everton side in a Merseyside derby, which I believe was in the League Cup as well, or the FA Cup. I think he might have been in the League Cup.
One of the cups, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he's already got 60 minutes this season in the Premier League, so he looks like he's going to be used a little bit more as a rotation option, or heavily in the latter stages of games.
I don't know whether he's going to get much game time this season though, is it?
He's definitely going to get more than 120 minutes.
Yeah.
If he can get like 800 minutes, I'll be delighted for the guy. If he can get like 8 to 10 starts, that would be superb.
I do wonder though if Liverpool should have sent him out on loan. With the roster of central midfield talent they've got, Thiago, Jordan Henderson, Naby Keita, Wijnaldum, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Fabinho. So like 6 central midfielders for those 3 roles.
But I do think he offers something a little bit different to most of them, if not Thiago is obviously the most well-rounded central midfielder in the world, but he's just so comfortable on the ball, great chance creation, not maybe as like defensively tenacious as he could be.
I don't get me wrong, I think he's great, but I think he could have played every minute of every game for somebody in the Championship this season. Had a really
that's a good point.
Platform season, a bit like when we sent Dean Henderson to Sheffield United. And he's a great player, and when Mason Mount went to Derby, Reece James went to Derby, Tammy went to Villa. I think he probably needs that season where it's like, I'm going to play every minute of every game, senior men's football. and show Liverpool why next season they don't need to renew Wijnaldum's contract.
Even lower down the Prem, like a Palace or someone
Yes.
could have found a home for him.
I think a lower side in the Premier League would have been a great destination. But it's been a while since like England have produced an 18, 19-year-old that looks comfortable in a top side, in a central midfield, like in an 8 position maybe, 8 come 10, who's comfortable like playing 60, 70 passes a game, which is what his numbers work out to on average per 90. And I think he is obviously going to be handled with great care by Jurgen Klopp. I mean, not a great emphasis on a creative midfielder in Jurgen Klopp's system, is there? So it maybe is a little bit of an awkward fit, but I do really like him as a player.
All right, so any other names? Obviously, we're not mentioning names across the continent because Continental Club did that, so go and check that out on EFD. I'm really hoping they put Jude Bellingham in there because Jude Bellingham is going to be the breakout star this season.
No, he wasn't.
I think Jude Bellingham might end up going to the Euros with England.
I think it was mainly Reina, Cherki, Wirtz, Camavinga they discussed. But yeah, Jude Bellingham.
Jude Bellingham is definitely going to be the guy.
Cherki looks exciting.
Is that the Leon lad? Yeah. It is, isn't it? The one that came on against Juventus.
Yeah, I think he's currently like 5th or 6th in Europe for completed dribbles a game. He's on like 4.5.
Ridiculous.
Like he's a really interesting creative passer as well. Like I mean, there are some seriously interesting talents around Europe right now.
Do we want to talk about Foden or Greenwood, or should we just say they're just sensational and move on?
Yeah, Greenwood's like a less talented Martinelli. Foden's kind of interesting.
He's had his gin.
I'm not really sure what the home is for Foden. And City have been really bad so far, which is a bit painful.
And KDB's playing as a 10.
Do you know what's quite interesting?
Weird, isn't it?
For me, Foden's kind of been playing as like a false 9, hasn't he? You look at his expected goals and assists. Like his expected goals are like 0.3 a game, which is like fine for a number 10, like good. But then his expected assists have dropped right off. And I think a lot of people think about Foden as a creator, or as an enabler at least, but he's kind of not playing in that role at the moment.
Because KDB's playing as a 10, he's playing 2 defensive midfielders.
And his position is weird. Like he's not a winger. He's not athletic enough, really.
He's been playing right wing.
He's not. He's kind of. You think he was more like a 10, but obviously, like De Bruyne has that role, and he's just not as good at it as David Silva, which is like understandable. I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're saying about. Has he been playing as a false 9? Because I know Mahrez played there in the last game and Sterling played there in the game before.
Yeah. It's almost like he's been playing right wing in that 4-2-3-1, but he's kind of coming inside, he's kind of hanging around Gabriel Jesus or whoever's playing up front, and he looks like, and the numbers suggest, he is that supporting striker, like when Dele Alli kind of played off Harry Kane in that sort of sense.
Would it not just be better to play him in the 10 and then play KDB a little bit deeper?
Or play KDB anywhere, like, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, because I just feel like Pep is being conservative because he's so panicky about that grim backline that he's having to play 2 defensive midfielders in front of him when maybe just give it a bit more of a go going forward.
Well, they just made such a mistake with Rodri, right? Like Rodri, I think, is a talented player, but I think they thought that he could be that rangy player who could cover the entire width of the pitch on his own, like Fernandinho, and almost nobody can do that. And so it's no knock on Rodri to say that he can't do that. But otherwise, you could imagine like a 4-3-3 in which you had a midfield of De Bruyne, Rodri and Foden. That would feasibly work if Rodri was as good as peak Fernandinho.
Is there any other Fernandinhos in world football? I was just thinking about that as you said it. Like Casemiro on his day.
Kante.
Ndombele before he went to Spurs.
Doesn't look like he has a physicality
I
be
agree.
a Fernandinho and Ndombele.
Really?
I really like him. Yeah.
Do you remember him playing against Man City in the Champions League? Like just bursting through challenges.
From
like,
what I've seen so far,
around
like I love him on the
he's
ball, but
injured.
he needs Højbjerg off the ball. Jesus.
I would agree. I think off the ball he's got a lot to work on, but on the ball is obviously sensational. When he's carrying the ball through players, he's almost unstoppable. It's like Moussa Dembele, watching Moussa Dembele, but when he's off the ball,
his drag backs are ridiculous.
Now I think about it, probably the closest to Fernandinho that I can think of is Zakaria.
Dennis Zakaria, yeah.
Like big defensive numbers. Actually, looks very similar to Ndombele at Lyon. Like over 4 tackles and interceptions a game, a couple of dribbles a game, extremely rangy, very good progressive passer. Like and still pretty young. Like he's probably somebody that City
Fabinho was
would
probably
be.
a guy who could have done it.
I don't think he's rangy enough, to be honest. And he plays in a very conservative midfield at Liverpool.
But even when
I think he's substantially overrated.
Even
I like him, but he's pretty overrated.
even when he's at centre half for Liverpool, he looks very solid.
Yeah, he's solid. Yeah, he's a good player, but
Because
like
he can cover
but
ground. and
Rodri's a
catch
good
up with
player.
people.
Like Rodri's an excellent player, but like what Fernandinho did for Man City was like really unusual, right?
Okay.
Like to cover that amount of ground on his own and do the great progressive passing and running, like that's difficult.
I think Fabinho could be that guy if he was asked to. I think he's.
But then you're just gambling on like, can he do this? Something that he's never shown an ability
He
to
plays
do.
like right back for Brazil. Like there was an expectation
Not
to get
well.
up and down.
Not well.
But I mean, all right, competently.
And even when he was at Monaco, you know, like he was not the rangy one. Actually, he had Bakayoko doing his running for him, and even now, like he has other players doing his running for him.
Bakayoko? Is he still at Chelsea? Did they sell him? Has he gone on
Did he
loan?
Did he go on loan?
Zach, what a moment behind the camera. Napoli on loan.
Oh yeah, to join up with Gattuso, who managed him at Milan.
That's a good loan signing for
Yeah,
Napoli.
yeah.
That's how we're finishing that section. Great loan signing for Napoli.
Should we move on then to some quick fire questions?
Yeah,
The
let's do it.
first one was sent in by Ben Ash. He says, with Arsene Wenger calling for throw-ins to be replaced with kick-ins, that was only in his own half, by the way, that he said that. So that was only for the speed of the game. What other radical rule change in the game would you like to see implemented?
Firstly, I'd like to say that I agree with that. Like kick-ins in your own half. Like if it's at the player discretion, like throw-ins are. You know when you're a bottom half team and you see Manchester City and Liverpool set up a press against you and you're just like, I've got to cob this down the line. They're going to get it back. It's going to come back to me, like to haunt me.
And he's right that
If you can just be like bang.
the team taking the throw of 9 outfield players to 10 outfield players, like this
It's
is
not your advantage to have a throw in.
But he's not inventing these ideas. Like people were talking about it, like Arsene Wenger's come up with this crazy thing. These things have been trialled. Like they've been trialled. A load of them were trialled in the second division of the Dutch league. The second division of the Dutch league, I think, last season or the season before, they were just like, let's just try a bunch of weird this year. And so they did kick-ins, they did taking free kicks to yourself. I think to some degree, like clock stopping might not be the worst thing. Like I feel
Adds
like
a lot of run into those legs because the ball's only in play for like an average.
yeah,
50
well,
minutes.
the only other way to do it though would be to decrease the length of a game to like 60 minutes, and I don't think anyone's going to agree to that.
Do you remember the Ajax Getafe game in the Europa League last season when the
ball
ball
was in
was
play
in
for
play
about
for 43 minutes?
I do partially
Yeah,
agree with
full
the
stop.
arguments of taking kick-ins to yourself in your own half because I think that immediately alleviates tactical fouling. If you are tactical fouling on the break and you give away a foul in your own half, the person can just stand straight back up and carry on dribbling.
Yeah.
Is not the worst idea, and I definitely think it would help solve some of those tactical fouling issues. But overall,
It's basically like rugby, right? Like just pick it
Yeah.
up, touch it, and go.
I don't think the game needs that much tweaking. I think it's pretty much perfect.
I don't know. I do think that the idea of like punishing more strictly cynical fouls, like I do think that's
Like
something
the
that
Luke
should
Shaw
be
one
done.
just running through.
Well, the Luke Shaw one though, I think everyone kind of agrees I should have been a red. But like, but some of this stuff when you're like a clear tactical foul, like you've got to find ways to disincentivize stuff like this. I also think like penalties just need to be seriously looked at. Like I do sometimes wonder if there just need to be like indirect free kicks in the box or something because the situation is when someone's like running away from goal and like Jamie Vardy is like the best in the world at this, but he's gaming the rules, so it's not cheating, but it does feel like a form of cheating. You know, when he like runs in front of someone, slows down,
Waits the contact.
slows down, waits for the contact, and then goes over. Even he hasn't been fouled. It's not a foul, but he gets a penalty for it. He's amazing at it, and I don't blame him for developing the ability. But I also don't really want football to be about that. Like football's such a low-scoring game that penalties, certainly the current situation with penalties, it does ruin it a little bit.
All right, let's do the next one. And this was put in by a lot of people. Talk about Project Big Picture. The reason we're not talking about Project Big Picture is it's now been rejected. But what do we think about it?
Well, you wrote
Tyne
the
Jordan.
Football Daily Explained on it, right?
Yeah, I did a Football Daily Explained
So
on
yeah,
it.
I mean, you should tell us.
I
really.
certainly think there's some things in there that have their merits, for sure. Obviously, the bailout to the EFL clubs, much needed. Looks like it's going to come. I think there are some really interesting things around going to 18 clubs, although some of the clubs that would miss out, it's a bit of a shame, and I'm not necessarily in agreement with cutting it from 92 to 90 league clubs. I also think that the idea of like a Premier League mini tournament summer is really fun. And there are going to have to be some changes made because whether we like it or not, the Champions League 24-25 is going to be expanded. And in order for Premier League and English clubs to compete, we're going to have to make changes at some level because we cannot play an extra 8 games in the Champions League alongside the current Premier League season, which is what is going to happen. So I think there are some things in there that have their merits, especially capping away ticket prices at £20, some of the shouts for safe standing. Obviously, the voting system cannot be implemented because it is a clear power grab by the top 6 clubs. And that
So what is that? Just to elaborate on it, like they
so
get
effectively
voting
at
power
the
on
moment, what happens is that It's a one club, one vote system where you need a 14 club majority to get anything passed in the Premier League. So if 14 clubs vote for something, or 15 or 16, then it can get passed. If only 12, 13 vote for it, it can't. What the new proposal proposes is that 9 clubs within the division are given special shareholder status. That's the big 6 plus Everton, West Ham, Southampton.
And that's because they're the oldest clubs, right?
But longest serving in the Premier League,
Which is weird. That's weird.
But then only 6 of those 9 have to agree on something for a rule to be changed or for something to be enacted.
Majority within the minority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what happens then within that voting system is that those clubs are also given extra power to vote on rule changes, league changes, CEOs of clubs, takeovers within clubs. If, let's say, the Newcastle takeover was happening, 6 of the 9 clubs could vote against that, and that couldn't happen.
That was an absolute debacle, wasn't it? Does that provide a bit more clarity around people coming into the league that are deemed unfit owners?
What if it might? But it could not come down to that, could it? If the big 6 clubs decided, okay, we don't want anybody else challenging us, and a legitimate owner came into, I don't know, Brighton, they could say you're not having that money.
Well, they wouldn't have let City in all those years ago, would they?
Which is obviously very, very questionable. And there's a lot of other sort of rules that they'd be proposing to change. But I think it has its merits on a level, but the voting system and the vetoing of club ownership and stuff like that is just cannot run. Just can't run. But there's definitely needs to be changes to the Premier League, in my opinion. I think some of the things, like the 18-team thing, might well end up being the best course of action.
Well, the jump down to the Championship as well, right? People spending 107% of their turnover on wages is like...
Well, it's a salary cap in the Championship proposal, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not sustainable. That's got to stop, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I think that, but part of that, I mean, like, the financial proposals are pretty generous, to be honest, like 250 mil up front, and then is it a quarter or is it 20%?
25%.
25% of TV rights revenue that the Premier League
revenue
will go down.
All revenue
will go down to like the EFL clubs. So that's a lot of money per year. Of course, the way that you claw some of that back is by going from 20 clubs to 18 in the Premier League, so that then your share is only, so then the remaining 75% is only split between 18 instead of 20.
Yeah, there's also 8% of the revenue goes to stadium repairs and improvements within the lower league.
And then paying back some of people's, like Liverpool and Spurs.
Claim back £180 million of their money, Spurs can.
That they've spent on their stadium increases.
Oh, right. Because it's like a reward, they incentivise having a good stadium.
Slightly different. And there's also £100 million bailout to the FA and grassroots.
I'm not surprised. In a way, like, I don't really blame them for saying, like, right, okay, we've got this leverage right now, we're going to give money to the lower league clubs, but we're going to ask for something in return. But to be honest, this should not be a matter of like the Premier League doing it. This should be a government bailout. The government should bail it out in the same way the government should bail out like the arts to a greater extent. They should bail out pubs and restaurants to a greater extent. Like, that is what government is there to do. Normally, the argument against bailing out industry is that if they've failed because they've taken risks, like for instance with the banks back in 2008, and we bail them out, there's no incentive for them to stop taking risks because they know they can fail, we'll bail them out, they fail, we'll bail them out. That's not the case for these lower league clubs. Almost all of those clubs are self-sustaining, like they make enough money to keep themselves running. So they're actually
because they're community assets, no one lets them go under.
So they're really good candidates for a bailout because you're like, as soon as they can start getting fans back in stadiums, they'll become solvent again. So you bail them out now, and as a result, you keep loads and loads of jobs.
Are you talking more like at League One, League Two level?
I'm talking the whole way down the pyramid. Like these football clubs, like we think of it as just like, oh, whether you like football or not, but football is obviously an industry as well and provides an incredible number of jobs to people like across the UK. So you have to bail it out because otherwise an industry just dies overnight.
Yeah, right. Should we move on to personal questions? You got any thoughts on it?
No, I've still got to watch your FD Explain. I'm looking forward to that.
Honestly.
Oh, it's like being in the old pub again, isn't it? Flies are back. Yay!
Okay, let's finish off with the personal one. This from Tanista Paul says, which video game did you play the most this year? Lockdown video games.
Warzone, hands down.
Easy.
I haven't yet to play with you boys, but yeah,
Warzone comfortably. Pato, anything other
Which
than
one's
Warzone?
that?
Call of Duty.
Oh, I've got that, I think. I just never played it.
I am absolutely shit at it now. Having not played it for a month and gone back to it, it's like everyone is incredible now.
Yeah, I know. I'm not going to lie. Although I did,
how do you get good to start?
Play it at an unbelievable
You just
amount.
Die relentlessly at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm not very good at it.
But you've got to kind of like sort your load out. You've got to work out what guns you're good with.
You also need to find the right players, like George and Zach.
Guns
you like
loadout's called.
Okay.
Like George and Zach, very good. Like
Sort your load out,
Jalab
everyone.
pulled 19 kills the other day. Like George regularly pulls 10 kills, which is very big numbers for Warzone.
that's sick. 19 kills in one game.
Although we did put up a 32 kill win or like 42 kill win last week, and it was one of them little glitches doing the never-ending
Smoke
syringe
grenade
tricks.
Oh, syringe thing.
Oh, like glitches. But that sent me
There was
insane, not gonna lie.
they have put some of the upgrades like have been overdue because the game got a little bit boring, didn't it? Like when the train came into it, I imagined it to be like the Great Train Robbery, like
Terrible.
massive carriages. It's literally like this little
pointless.
cart going around. But no, I do think the subway introduction of subway has been good.
Pointless.
I don't know. I still enjoy it. But what else have you been playing apart from that?
Nothing.
What, a new
literally
FIFA? Because a lot of the lads don't know whether to buy it or not, and it's kind of like the first, second year maybe, if like being a bit hesitant whether to buy it or.
I haven't really played it either. Has to be said. I've played maybe 1 or 2 games when I was drunk. That's it. Haven't played
Just
it
when you're drunk.
Yeah.
Right, and lonely. What games have you been playing then?
I played a bit of The Last of Us Remastered.
Because you told me that was shitting you up a little bit. That's giving you anxiety.
Oh, it's just like, you play it for a couple of hours and then you're like, I'm done with this now. Like, because after you've just done the same level so many times and you're like running out of shivs on clickers and stuff, I'm just like, it's so annoying. I'm so bored.
I thought that game was awful. Has to be said, Last of Us. I'm going to take some heat in the comments for that, but it's
I haven't completed it.
slow. I can't play games by myself either. I cannot play campaign games, and it's the slowest of all campaign games.
I kind of like there to be like a good story, and that's what I like
Yeah.
about The Last of Us. The
Yeah.
Last of Us was part of that real generation of games that revolutionised storytelling in gaming.
But I will always skip a cutscene. I'm never watching this cut. I'm never going to watch a
it's
cutscene
not
in
for
a
you.
video game.
It's not for you.
For goodness
Bang
sake,
a couple
I'm here
of
to play,
Ritalin,
not watch
mate, and you can
TV.
just- Yeah.
Like, if I wanted to watch TV, I'd watch an actually good TV show or film.
I mean, that's fair enough.
By the way, good TV show recommendation: The Morning Show. I don't know if I told you about this last week.
Oh.
Oh my god!
I'm not
Yeah.
that.
Unbelievable. Probably the best TV show I've watched in the last 2-3 years.
I was going to weigh in with because people quite liked the Fall. Succession, but I believe you've
I
said
love
that
Succession,
you've advised me to watch that before. Started watching it with Lauren a couple of days ago.
It's great.
Unbelievable, mate.
All
Really,
right.
really good.
There we go. That's the end of Sunday Vibes for yet another week. If you want your question answered next week, slam it in the comments below or send it to us on Twitter. One-on-one out this week, wasn't it? Wednesday.
Yes, it finally
eventually.
went out. Yeah, I had some export issues on Sunday, was it? Or when it was supposed to go out. So it went out Wednesday. So please go and watch that. The rise and fall of Fernando Torres, as voted for by the Euro Football Daily Masses.
So podcast was on.
It was on how worried are we, but this time with Europe's big clubs. So we talked about PSG, Juventus, Bayern, their ropey starts to the season. That was with Michael McCubbin and Doogie Critchley.
There we go then. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.